start with basics of firewall first, and then talking about basics of VNet, so that we'll try to understand how Azure Firewall fits into that. And to understand deeply on Azure Firewall, we really need to understand routing or routes in Azure, which we have two kinds of routes: system routes and user-defined routes. So let me start with basic diagram first. So basics of firewall, as you know, when any traffic, say user coming to connect to the machine, say RDP port number 3389, firewall come into the picture, and the firewall will have some rules. So any traffic comes through a firewall towards your VM, we called as inbound traffic. And any traffic going out towards a VM through a firewall out, it's your outbound traffic. So by default, what happens? We normally create some rules. Rule number 10, rule number 20, rule number 30, rule number 40. And normally we have a deny rule we called as global rule. So normally, suppose admin or anyone try to connect the VM and it's used RDP port number 3389. They check all the rules in this order. Rule number 10, RDP allow. Rule number 20, RDP allow. If nothing is allowed, deny always be there. Yes, we have a recording on that. So if nothing is allowed, it always be a deny. So say example, rule number 10, 3389 allowed. So we are able to connect to the VM. So another situation where rule number 10 is say block and rule number 20 is say RDP allow, conflicting. So again, they will process the rules in this order, and rule number 10 says it's blocked. So wherever the rule matches, it stops the rule within that number. So any conflict between number 10 and number 20, 10 will win. Means block will applicable. So this way, normally any generic firewall works. So first is inbound, outbound. Third is we allow some rules. If nothing is there, then I always be there. And this rule is nothing: source IP, destination IP, source port, destination port, and what you want, allow or deny. So this is called 5-tuple rule. Objects make your rules. So this is first fundamental of any firewall workaround or architecture. In terms of Azure, we deploy a network in Azure. Network in Azure we called as virtual network. We define some address space, DHCP range kind of, say 10.0.0.0.16. So total 65,000 approximate IPs we have. And logically, we created subnets, say subnet number 1. So my first subnet range is 10.0.0.0/24. And my second subnet will be 0010. So this way we build so many subnets as per our need. Best practice in Azure, if you have any application, any specific servers, it should have a separate application, separate subnet. Example, subnet number 3 is my SQL servers, for a dedicated subnet for SQL database. And if I built a one VM here, first three IPs are reserved in Azure. So first valid IP for a VM is 10.0.0.4 because I am into 000 subnets. And another VM here, it's 10. So my first valid IP for the VM is 10.0.10. This VM is VM1 jump box and VM2 web subnets or web. Another best practice for security is we should not allow public IP to the production machines. So what is public IP? If anybody is on internet, they should not connect to the VM directly. So especially for a production machine. So I'm assuming this is my prod machine. So it means we should not have any public IP. We should have only one IP called private IP. And here we have public IP. So it means I'm sitting anywhere in the world through internet. I connect my public IP, Jumpbox VM, and from Jumpbox, I internally connect my prod VM. Because by default, communication between all the VNets or all the subnets are by default allowed. I repeat, I'm sitting somewhere over internet. I'm not able to connect my prod VM. I have to come to the Jumpbox machine, like a Citrix kind of, and from there I jump into my production machine. Over internet, direct access is not allowed. Now, first of all, this is the architecture of your VNet, and on top, I need to deploy firewall. To deploy a firewall, you need a very dedicated subnet called ACAPS, Azure, FCAPS, firewall, again SCAP, Azure Firewall subnet. Something 0010. This one is my dummy, suppose. So this one will be my 30. So 0010 and next one will be 20. So three subnets. Is it default communication between subnet is a security risk? Never, because it's internal communication going through a backbone of the Azure, properly secure, internal. So now we need to understand now how the communication flow happens. What are the default communication we have? As I said, any communication between subnet 1 to subnet 2 or subnet 1 to 3 or 2 to 3 is by default allowed. It's because of system routes. So to understand deeply, we need to understand real routing concept or routes concepts. What is routes? I'll take one simple example. I'm having a virtual machine. I want to connect to the internet. At home, you have a gateway. So it will go to my router IP. So traffic will go to the router IP, router go to the ISP, and then go to the internet world. So step 1, step 2, step 3, how we go towards internet. Routes. In Azure world, we have two kinds of routes. System routes and second is user-defined routes. And maximum problem or issues comes to understand these two. First is system routes always be a default. Second, either it comes as a default or either it comes from some technical configuration. I will tell you what do you mean by technical configuration. But in both the cases, we are not going to change the behavior of the route. Very important statement. The behavior of the route, we are not going to change. In user-defined route, never comes as a default. And the main objective to create is based on the situation and scenario. Admin normally create this user-defined routes. And now question is why? Why we need to do that? Opposite of this. Here we are not going to change the behavior of the route. And here we want, literally we want to change the behavior of the route. And this statement is very critical to understand these two routes and the comparison. What do you mean by behavior? So I'll take one example. By default in Azure, internet is allowed. And it goes directly towards internet world. Now, I don't want traffic will go directly to the internet. Example. So now you see in this diagram, as I said, this is my jump box. I'll take RDP to my prod subnet, web subnet, and by default, internet is allowed directly towards internet world. It's a by default. If something is by default internet, it is called system routes. If traffic is directly going towards internet, how you block Facebook? No chance. So what do you want here? You need to create a user-defined route. Any traffic towards internet, please forward this traffic to the firewall IP. So firewall IP. So anyone production subnet wants to talk to the internet, please talk to my firewall. So I'm not using the default route. I'm changing the behavior. Please talk to my firewall. And firewall have a rules. Facebook is blocked. Yes, guys, make sense? Because you are changing the behavior. If you are changing the behavior, it's called user-defined routes. Yes, good. One or two response will be great. UDR always attached to the subnet. Very important. So it means whatever the path I define, I attach to the production subnet, whatever the subnet. As soon as I attach, this subnet machine will follow the path. Anyone wants to talk to internet, talk to the firewall. Now, Azure Firewall comes into two types. The difference SQs or speed that we'll talk about later on. So Azure Firewall is stateful firewall. So what do you mean by stateless and stateful? Example, we have another concept in Azure called NSG, Network Security Group. We just do a port blocking, port 80, block, port 443, block. And you know as a technical person, if I block 80 and 443, My Facebook block, my IBM.com official website also blocked, including Google also blocked. But if I allow port 80 and 443, Facebook is also allowed, IBM also allowed, Google is also allowed. So it means NSG don't have that capability to talk about a specific packet like stateful. He does not know what is Facebook, what is Gmail. He don't have packet filtering. So that's why it is just a port level protection. So advanced firewall, normally we do Azure Firewall. So the big difference between NSG and Azure Firewall is Azure Firewall is having stateful, built-in high availability, and fully integrated with your monitoring, threat intelligence, as well as you can block specific websites. So those capabilities also, and we have, including you can integrate with your VPN services. Create a firewall. To create a firewall in Azure, only one important, you need a dedicated subnet with a case sensitive name, A caps, F caps, S caps. So if you have a dedicated case sensitive subnet, you are good to deploy the firewall. Further, firewall, definitely it block your protocols, ports, as well as websites. So logically, they divide a centralized policy called whatever the name you define during deployment, say Contoso firewall policy or ABC firewall policy. In that, you can do network rules, NAT rules, network address translation, DNAT, and you can block any website with application rules. So once again, any port blocking, NAT rules, network rules, network address translation, DNATs, and if you want to block any specific website application rule, all are supported in your firewall capability. Now, when you try to deploy a firewall, we have three categories, three speeds we called as SQs in Azure term or cloud term. One is basic, one is standard, one is premium. When I work with 10 projects, normally we deploy standard. Customer is not worried about the cost. Then few cases we deploy premium. That's my real example, but we never deploy basic in our life, not at all. So the difference between basic, standard, and premium is basic have no Microsoft support in reality. It's just a basic. So in real terms, we need a support. We need a good throughput, connectivity, high speed. We need best features. So those things you will get it in standard and premium. If you see the difference very carefully, standard have your all the filtering, performance, integration, except two things: intrusion detection, IDS, TLS termination is not there, and in terms of web application, you see what you called as web content filtering is there in standard also, web categories. So almost you have everything except your IDPS capabilities. But if you see in the basic, you don't have web content, web categories. What is web categories? Say example, business series websites, IBM, social media websites, Facebook categories. I'm not going to block individual websites. I will just select business categories allowed, dating and social media websites like Facebook blocked. So those are called categories. So what we need, standard is giving all the capabilities except your IDPS and SSL termination. System routes. So system routes, as I said, any communication, whether it comes as a default or either after some technical configuration. This is what we discussed. What is technical configuration? I'll take one more example. What do you mean by technical configuration? I have a data center in US. We built cloud in Azure, my VNet capabilities. This is my Cisco router. I built my router in Azure. In router in Azure, we called as VNet gateway. And I done this site-to-site VPN capabilities. So I'm sitting in US office. This is Azure. I'm able to talk to the Azure. Is it not default? It is after some technical configuration. So in both the cases, either it comes as a default, either after technical configuration, we are not changing the behavior of the route. So behavior of the route means route will go here to the VNet router and to the VM. So that's the way. Now let's do it. You see, custom routes change the behavior. So example, front-end subnet and the back-end subnet. Two subnets, normally they talk by default. But now I want, they should not talk. They should talk with some appliance. So subnet 1 want to talk to subnet 2. Please don't talk with the system route. You want to talk, please go with it appliance. So if you want to change the behavior, it's another example of user-defined routes. Let's do a good demo on this. So I'm going to create subnet 1, subnet 2, and the firewall subnet 2. So 10.0.0.16 means 65,000 approximate, and we have a default subnet. Delete. No subnet as a default. So name for subnet, subnet 1, jump box, 10.0.0.24. Subnet 2, web subnet 10, and subnet number 3 is my firewall subnet. You see the case sensitive name, A caps, F caps, S caps, subnet number 3. So 3 subnets. I'll put it in a screenshot so that you can easily understand. So after that, I built one VM. You remember public IP, red VM. Another VM in my prod subnet. It's a green VM, means only private IP, no public. And if I deploy this VM, jump box, and web VM, so what will be the private IP? 10.0.0.4, and this will be 1 dot, so 10.0.1.4. And if I deploy a firewall in few minutes, the firewall IP will be 10.0.2 dot, so 2.4 will be the firewall IP, and no public IP. So nobody can connect over internet through a public IP to the prod VM. So if I take a RDP to the jump box, and from jump box to the prod VM, and then try to access internet, Facebook allow, Gmail allow, Yahoo allow, everything should be allowed. Meanwhile, I'll deploy my firewall also. Firewall Microsoft. Easy Firewall 01. Do you want high availability? Let's do it. What do you want? Basic, standard, and premium? Let's do it standard. Firewall policy? Yes. Azure Firewall 1 policy. Some name. Standard. So I have not done anything. Resource group, firewall name, high availability, standard, and the firewall policy. Then they are asking me, firewall should integrate with which VNet? New VNet or existing VNet? Existing webinar VNet. Automatically he will pick my firewall subnet and the public IP. So Microsoft will release a public IP on this and review and create. So my firewall is also ready in few minutes. Yes, you missed something. Yes, lots of things. I will explain you in the last as a recap. So this will be my firewall. So my one VM is done, second is going on, and firewall is also going on. So if I go to my virtual machines, one is running, one is creating. Running is my jump box, and jump box is having a public IP. And you see on the right hand side, jump box have public IP, production machine don't have public IP. So I'm logging with the public IP. Jump box. So meanwhile, login is happening. It takes 2 minutes. Can anyone do a guess? What will be the private IP of this jump box VM? Do you remember? First three IPs are reserved. If first three IPs are reserved, what will be the first IP of this VM in a jump box subnet? Yes. So, and by the time my second VM is still going on, which is my to avoid any confusion, I'll just put it as background on this. So that's my jump box. And what is by default? Google allow, Yahoo allow, everything is allowed. I'm not going to show you this because that's not my prod VM. I'm not worried about Gmail allow, Yahoo allow, or something allow in this. Okay, come to my prod VM. What is the IP of the prod VM, guys? Next subnet 1.4, and I'm not able to connect over internet also because of no public IP. So it's RDP into RDP web VM, and I'm very much worried about Gmail, Yahoo, whatever allowed in prod VM. So it takes 2 minutes. Meanwhile, I'll create a route table, change the behavior, and before that, let me show you the default route. Say for a web networking, NIC card, and every NIC card, if you go down, there is a routes, and this route says very clearly that any communication between subnet 1 and subnet 2 is by default allowed, internet allowed, and so on. You see, default entire VNet is allowed internally, internet allowed, and some extra routes based on the Azure level. It's not impact on us. Tomorrow, when you do a VPN services on premises to Azure or VNet to VNet connectivity, any kind of advanced solution on the network, you will get another route here. So right now, two are very important for us. So I'm going to create a route. And I'll say this route is route 1, East US. Route. So I'll say route, add the route. Anyone wants to talk to internet, please talk to router. Please talk to VNet. Please talk to internet. So firewall is not my router. Firewall is not my VNet. Firewall is not my internet. Then firewall is my virtual appliance. So anyone wants to talk to the internet, please talk to the firewall. And firewall is my, but before that, let's go to the jump box. Oh, sorry, the prod VM. So no confusion, I'm into RDP into RDP. So this is my prod web subnet. That's my web subnet. You can check with hostname and IP config 10014. And let's check by default internet is working or not. So we have google.com, yes. Facebook.com, Yes. Google, Facebook, IBM.com, and last Yahoo.com. Everything is allowed. Oh. Okay, so everything is allowed. So now my route I'll attach to the subnet. So from today onwards, my prod subnet, whenever they want to talk to the internet, they talk to the firewall because we define the routes. And this way you associate to any production subnet. And now come to the firewall. So firewall, we have firewall policy, and we have firewall. And in the firewall, you have a public IP, you have a private IP 2.4. And if you remember, we already redirected to 2.4. So it means it looks good. So only what we need, go to the policies and DNAT network application. I want to block RDP, network rule. I want to block internet, RDP rule, internet port 80 network rule. I want to block a specific website application rule. So let's block application rule. So now say rule number 1, priority 100, allow rule number 1, any traffic or specific traffic, it's up to you. So specific means 10.0.10 specific. So any traffic with a subnet or any traffic, they want to talk to HTTP, HTTPS, and www. Google is allowed. HTTP, HTTPS, www, IBM is allowed. I've not done category option right now. So it will take 2 minutes. So meanwhile, summary, we talk about basic firewall, how it works. We'll talk about VNet config, how VNet works in Azure, types of Azure firewall, differences. We talk about routes, system routes versus user-defined routes, how to create routes, how to deploy firewall, how to attach routes to subnet and create firewall rules. This is what we done so far. So now rule is done. So I'll back to my prod VM, prod subnet. Let's do Yahoo. You see? No Yahoo. What about Google? Google is there. What about IBM? IBM is also there. And what about my Facebook? Facebook is not there, you see. And after 1 hour, it will give you message also due to firewall policy kind of default message. Yes, I covered almost a good information in short time and almost talked about these very important concepts and very important things in Azure Life or Cloud Life.